Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Dan Casper here with you, as always, for every single episode of the podcast. I always appreciate you tuning in and giving me your feedback and such, which you can. Hit me up on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and such. But on this episode, a little bit of a shorter one, I wanted to chat some football here. We're a week away from the official league opening, or the new season, opening day. Well, not really opening day, but league year. That's what I'm trying to say. The league year. All right. Yesterday, we had the deadline come and pass for teams to put franchise tags on their players. And some decisions may be kind of surprising. Some others, not really. I mean, I don't think there was anything too shocking out there. But now that deadline has come to pass, we can add some more potential free agents to our list. And I know I mentioned it the other day. Greg Rosenthal, NFL.com. He's got his list of top 101 NFL free agents. Updated, adjusted a little bit with players, getting the franchise tag attached to them. Kind of like, for example, Winfield from Tampa Bay. Sorry, Bucs fan or Packers fans, but he ain't going anywhere and he ain't coming to Green Bay. But then you kind of throw in a guy like a Saquon Barkley. So, does some of these moves potentially change or alter Green Bay's off-season approach here a little bit? So, let's kind of jump into, I guess, a little bit of a free agency primer again. So, the other day we talked about a few safeties, and I feel like when you look at this market, we know Green Bay needs not just one, but probably a couple safeties. Like, if I were a betting person, and this is a dangerous way to get into this because I'm not, it is still Green Bay and you don't really know what to expect. But I feel like Green Bay and Goody are at least going to bring in one veteran free agent safety. I feel like there's at least going to be one, and maybe even doubling up in the draft, or at least one in the draft, fairly high in the draft. Would they potentially bring back Rudy Ford? They could. Jonathan Owens, they could. I think Darnell Savage is probably bye-bye at this point. But knowing how important or crucial or critical, whatever we want to term it, the safety position is in Jeff Hafley's defense, I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that we are going to get one in free agency, get one in a draft. Kind of similar to when they brought in Adrian Amos and then they drafted Darnell Savage over there. So we highlighted, we took a look at a few different safeties yesterday. Xavier McKinney is, he's I think every Packers fan's number one target on this free agent list. We don't need to keep revisiting that one, if you will. Although I will say, a little bit of if you're looking for maybe some potential nuggets here, Xavier McKinney did spend a year at Alabama with new defensive pass game coordinator Derek Ansley. If you're looking for a little bit of connection there. Got a connection there. Another connection, though, is another safety out there. And that's Fuller, Jordan Fuller, from the Rams. What's the connection, you may be asking? When he was at Ohio State, his defensive coordinator for a year in 2019 was Jeff Hafley. So you have a little bit of a connection, potentially, there as well. If you're looking to maybe bring in guys who are familiar with this style of defense or familiar with, the coaching staff and vice versa, does that factor in? I think it factors in a little bit. I don't think it's maybe the number one tell-all thing, but when you factor in Xavier McKinney's got a little bit of experience with their new defensive pass game coordinator, a guy who, his background is defensive backs, Derek Ansley. I think there's a little bit something there. Then Jordan Fuller, who's still only 26. He's a safety. Played a year under your new defensive coordinator when he was at Ohio State. Fuller, team captain, kind of like Xavier McKinney. This is a guy that I would be A-okay with if they brought in here too. If they gave him a deal. Might be a little bit cheaper. He probably is going to be a little bit cheaper than what McKinney is going to command on the free agent market. But I do think one tip, if there's one thing we've learned from Brian Gutekunst when it comes to free agency, he wants guys who have been available, have been healthy, have played a lot of games. Because you go back to when he signed Preston, Za'Darius, Adrian, etc., what was kind of a common theme with those players? They were guys that didn't really miss a lot of time due to injury. They were guys that were available. They had a history of playing a ton of games. That has continued with Preston Smith. I think Preston Smith maybe missed 1 or 2 games since he's been with the Packers. I think that's a common thing, or that's a theme that Goody is, I would think, is still kind of looking at. Is like when he looks at all these safeties, I think one of the check boxes, or one of those boxes that he wants to check off is like, okay, how many games have they played? Like, are they a reliable player out there? Do they have a history of staying healthy? You look at Fuller. He played 17 games last year. 2022, only played in 3. But in that 2021 Super Bowl season, played all 60. Had 113 tackles that year, too. So I think that has got to be an important thing when it comes to these free agents, whether it's a safety, whether it's a lineman, or whoever it may be, linebacker. I think that's got to be one thing that Goody is going to continue to look at. A couple other safeties. If you're maybe looking at some quote unquote cheaper options out there, maybe some options, maybe you're bringing in 2 free agent safeties and you're still going to draft them, but you're going to start off with 2 veterans. Go down a little bit on this list, and there's I think a couple of names that could be some intriguing options. One, a guy who's familiar with this potential style of defense. He spent the last couple of years with the New York Jets and Robert Saleh. Jordan Whitehead, safety over there. He's 26 years old. Spent some time with the Bucs. He's a hard-hitting safety. Last year, 4 picks for the Jets. We know Hafley's got a little bit of experience, with the 49ers, coaching under Robert Saleh, that style of defense. But going back to, you want a guy who's available, you want a guy who's shown to stay on the field. You look at Jordan Whitehead, who's been in the league since 2018. He's played double-digit games every single season. 15, 14, 16, 14, 17, 17. Available. Accountability. Now I know, a little bit older you get, maybe that kind of tends to go down, maybe more susceptible to injury and such. But, again, could he be a little bit of a cheaper option or was it a couple years ago? He signed a 2-year deal with the Jets. $7 million, I think it was like a 2-year, $14.5 million deal. Say it's something similar to that. Another guy, and this one would be potentially a little bit of a riskier one. But he's got familiarity with Derek Ansley, their new defensive pass game coordinator. A little bit of an unknown. And that's Gilman. Alohi Gilman from the Chargers. And why I say he's maybe a little bit of a risk is because he had a career year last year. He was a former 6th-round pick, finally got an opportunity to be a starter last year and took advantage of it. If you look at Pro Football Focus grades, okay, if that's one of those top ones that you look at, he put up an 86.1 grade. That ranked 7th among safeties. And he had an 89.2 coverage grade, which ranked 5th. He also placed 2nd in pass breakups on almost 100 fewer coverage snaps than the player he tied with. The safety a lot of Packers fans wanted, Antoine Winfield Jr. He also finished with a run defense of 75.2, according to Pro Football Focus. Compared to his couple years before, huge jumps. Now, is that in correlation because he finally got a chance to be a starter? Could it be he's entering the final year and, putting up motivated that way? Well, no, right? But he had a heck of a season last year, and he's got familiarity with with the Packers' new defensive pass game coordinator, Derek Ansley, who was his defensive coordinator last year. Connections. If you're looking at some connections there, there's options from this safety group. And there's, I think, a chance if Green Bay wanted to, if they wanted to bring in a guy, a couple of different maybe guys. One where like it's a Xavier McKinney and you're giving him a 4 or 5 year deal and you're paying him to be one of the top safeties out there. And then you know what? We'll go down a little bit further, bring in another safety, double dip it, kind of like what they did with Preston and maybe Preston and Zadarius. We're going to double dip in that safety market. We're going to bring in, 2 safeties, maybe one, like a McKinney who's going to get a boatload of cash, and then maybe it's a guy like Jordan Whitehead or Gilman. But we're still going to draft. Could you? Honestly, I could feel like Green Bay doing an approach like that where they signed Zadarius and they signed Preston, then they also drafted Rashawn Gary. They got to get this safety position figured out here. And I think when you look at the free agent market, you've got options out there. But also, in a draft, you got potential if your safety's not there at the back end of the first round. I know Cooper is a big one out there from Iowa. Could there be a guy in the second round, a Kitchens or whoever? But I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Green Bay maybe double dip at this safety position. Just to mix it up here a little bit because we've been pounding the table so much on safeties. Let's switch it over here a little bit to, because I think one position that is going to be important for Green Bay to figure out this offseason is also that other linebacker. Assuming McDuffie's going to be the Mike linebacker, the middle linebacker. You got Quay Walker that's going to be the weak side linebacker. Who's going to be that Sam? Who's going to be that Sam linebacker? And that's where I kind of go to some of the moves made by yesterday as maybe some options. And we're looking for connections, right? Well, the Dolphins yesterday released linebacker Jerome Baker, clearing away $9.8 million in cap space. The reason I bring this guy's name up is Capinelli, the new linebackers coach for the Packers. Where did he come from? You guessed it, Miami. Connections. Could that be an option where the Packers maybe look at like, oh, okay, so Baker's now available. We've got his former linebacker coach with us right now. We need another linebacker. Is that a match made right there? Could that be a potential option? Possibly. Again, when you look at Baker, you want to talk about being on the field ever since 2018. Double-digit games. 16, 16, 16, 16, 17. Last year, 13. But he's been a solid contributor throughout his career. That could be a potential option over there too, because I do feel like, we've been talking so much about offensive line depth and safeties that I think if you're going to go to a base 4-3, and I get it, 4-2-5, nickel, all that stuff, there's going to be variations. You still need a little bit more depth at that linebacker spot. I'm operating under the assumption that Devondre Campbell's going to be released, and I could be completely wrong on that, but I'm just going to operate under that assumption. So, could you get a guy like a Baker, maybe on a 2-year deal for a few $1,000,000 here? But he can come in. Linebackers coach is familiar with him already. Kind of got a little veteran leadership there. I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. But I think linebacker, whether it's in a draft, day 2, day 3, or a free agent out there, that's something that Green Bay also has to address. And I look at a guy like a Jerome Baker, who potentially could be that option. Could a guy like Jordan Brooks from Seattle be an option? Could be. He's kind of been inconsistent through his young career, but he has shown a lot of good stuff, shown some potential over there as well. If Green Bay wanted to lock up a younger guy, maybe, would they go that route? But don't be surprised if Green Bay goes out there and tries to find another veteran linebacker, off the ball linebacker here. Could it be a Drew Tranquil from Kansas City? Guy was kind of one of those cog guys, great role players for that Kansas City defense. Not bad in coverage either. Could it be, going to staying with Kansas City, but, Willie Gay Jr.? Could he be another option? So, Josie Jewell. There is a deep market of off-ball linebackers for this free agency class, too. This is where I feel like if Green Bay is going to be aggressive, going back to the question I had asked a little bit earlier, how do you want your team to be aggressive in free agency? For the Packers sense, do you want them to be aggressive in free agency this year? And I just feel like the needs that this team has, you've got a class that's, deep in safeties from the free agent market, deep in off-ball linebackers in the free agent market. Options out there. Because I feel like, with the draft, we're all having fun with mock drafts right now. I've done the simulators. I've done how it all kind of plays out. And I'll tell you right now, it's like, man, I could go with an offensive lineman. I could go with a safety, wherever it goes. Do you go with a linebacker in first round? I want to see Green Bay plug in some holes via free agency and then utilize the draft to create more depth or fill in those other holes potentially there. If you've got the opportunity to bring in a safety and an off-ball linebacker, do that. That doesn't mean necessarily you can cross off that need on the draft, but I just feel like with that linebacker, with that safety position where you need another off-ball linebacker, you need some safety depth, you've got those two position groups that have some pretty darn good depth at this year, that I feel like Green Bay has to take advantage of that. They have to take advantage of that. Especially now, with how the season ended last year, with the momentum, with the pressure, like, okay, expectations now, you don't got any more leeway. You were maybe a couple plays away from getting to the NFC Championship game. You surpassed boatloads of expectations this year. Expectations are grown. There's nothing wrong with that. Goals now are championships again. Wasn't that long of an off year. Really wasn't an off year. So I want for a time where you've got these needs of a safety and those linebackers, and you've got options on that free agency market now, take advantage of that. That's what I want to see. And then use the draft to create that depth. Now, Saquon Barkley, going back to that question. Would you like to see him in the green and gold? Now, if it were me, I don't think it should be a priority A. I think I would like them to grab a safety or two and another linebacker, another off-ball linebacker, Sam linebacker. But the other part of me is like, dude, that would be so fun to see Saquon and Aaron Jones in the same backfield helping out Jordan Love. And, you've got young receivers and tight ends. Maybe you can afford it a little bit because you're not paying, big contracts to your other offensive playmakers. It would be fun, right? And I don't think you could completely shut the door on it if we go back to what the reports were, that Green Bay was interested in Jonathan Taylor and apparently interested in Saquon Barkley at the draft deadline. And I think if there's one thing that showed this past year, how important a running back is in this system. They missed Aaron Jones when he was hurt. They missed him a lot. And when he got back, he was the main reason, one of the main reasons why that team had the success at the end of the season that they did and in the postseason. A lot of it had to do with Aaron Jones and the way he was playing. But this was also a year, too, where he missed a lot of time. Could that factor in their decision? Be like, hey, we need to. We know how much Aaron Jones means to this team. He's still got a lot of talent, but we also maybe need to watch some snaps. He can't be a bell cow running back. Can't be that guy that gets the majority of the carries. We gotta split that up. And how about adding another playmaker type like a Saquon Barkley, where those two sharing the load a little bit? It'd be fun, and I don't think you could completely shut the door on it based off what we've heard. It wouldn't necessarily be my first one. Would I be mad if they did it? No. But I don't think you could shut that door. I do think if we look at the signs, if we look at those hints, they really want to build up that running back depth. They know how important a running back is, a versatile running back too. A running back that, isn't just going to be a power runner. You want him utilized in the passing game. Saquon does that really well. Saquon would fit in this offensive system. Be a lot of fun to watch. So in the past, we would scoff at that idea. Ha! Ain't happening. I don't know if you can right now. I have my doubts whether he's going to do it, whether he would sign there, and whether Green Bay would be uber aggressive to try to bring him over. But I wouldn't be surprised if we hear the report that, hey, Green Bay's in contact. They're trying to, bring him into Green Bay for a visit and all that. Don't be surprised if you hear that. Not anymore. All right, that's going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. A little bit of a shorter one, but that's okay. Big thanks, as always, for tuning in however you tune into the podcast. But if you got a few seconds, if you don't mind, click that follow and subscribe button and give it a 5-star rating, like on Apple and Spotify, so others can find the podcast. Positive review, too, on Apple, so others can find the podcast. Till next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.